They were the faces that built Hollywood. Faces so famous they became a kind of currency on posters and fan letters, immortalized in headlines. And yet the story of many of those faces is not just of fame, it's a story of fear. Fear of time. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being replaced by a younger version of the world. This is a story about 9 icons, people whose looks defined eras, and how in trying to freeze themselves in amber, they sometimes erased the very thing that made them beloved: expression, character, humanity. It's not a gossipy parade. It's an exploration of an industry's cruel paradox. Hollywood worships youth while surviving on nostalgia. That contradiction has tempted some stars into decisions that turned out tragically wrong. I want you to hold one image in mind as you listen. An actor who built a career on a single knowing glance, a smile that said 1,000 lines. Imagine that smile stretched tight, silenced. Imagine the laugh lines that were proof of a life peeled away. The following profiles are portraits of that loss. Mary Pickford, the first star, and one of the first to become a cautionary tale. She wasn't just an actress. She helped invent celebrity. Co-founder of United Artists, the first actor to command unprecedented money and attention. In silent cinema, Pickford's face was everything. Tiny changes in her expression told entire scenes. But in seeking to hold on to that screen-earned youth, she became one of the earliest public victims of cosmetic surgery. In the 1930s, long before modern techniques and safety standards, Pickford reportedly underwent facelifts meant to preserve her image. Early procedures were crude by today's standards. Skin pulled taut without a modern understanding of deeper facial anatomy. Rather than refreshing her looks, those operations tightened her features into something less expressive. Friends later described a strange, frozen quality. For an actress whose entire craft depended on expressive subtlety, the irony was devastating. Pickford retreated from public life. When she did appear, some colleagues were startled, unable to recognize the woman who once conveyed emotion with a glance. Her arc is heartbreaking because she helped create the machinery of stardom, only to be convinced by that machine that her natural face was a liability. Joan Rivers, who turned the conversation about cosmetic surgery into a punchline and a lifeline. Rivers began with a razor-sharp comedic voice and a fearless appetite for reinvention. Unlike many celebrities who denied their procedures, she weaponized hers. A running gag that both disarmed critics and kept her in the public eye. "When I die, they'll donate my body to Tupperware," she famously quipped. That humor masked a deeper reality. What began with routine maintenance became an ever-escalating series of procedures spanning decades. Facelift, eye lifts, neck lifts, implants, Botox, fillers, and countless tune-ups. Rivers once said that in show business, wrinkles equaled unemployment. Whether you agreed or not, the cost was visible. Over time, her face grew tighter, less animated, and the headlines about her appearance began to overshadow the career that had earned her a place in comedy history. Yet, Rivers also reveals another truth. For some performers, self-mockery was an act of control. If the media would make their jokes, she'd make them first and better. It bought her agency, even while it complicated what was left of her face. Jocelyn Wildenstein is the extreme case everyone uses as shorthand for surgical excess. Her transformation, radical, deliberate, and highly publicized, stopped being about aging gracefully and became about reshaping identity. Wildenstein's procedures reportedly aimed at feline features: high cheekbones, slanted eyes, a narrowed nose. Combined operations, implants, and repeated injections created a new, unmistakable visage that left her unable to move through the world anonymously. Her story is frightening because it exposes an obsessiveness that no amount of celebrity can soothe. Psychiatrists and surgeons who have commented on cases like hers have pointed to body dysmorphic patterns when the goal shifts from enhancement to transformation. For many stars we'll meet, Wildenstein's path is the extreme mirror of a more common impulse, the belief that surgery can perfect what time has altered. Zsa Gabor was glamour personified, witty, spontaneous, and always ostentatious. She made elegance a public performance: jewels, hair, couture, and a quick joke. But that performance came with a commitment to maintaining an image long after the beauty that launched it had naturally aged. Gabor's face changed gradually, and then, unmistakably, the perpetual look of surprise some observers called the frozen stare. Why does this happen? Because when procedures repeatedly reset the surface, the muscle memory underneath learns to move against a new, tighter landscape. The laugh lines that once punctuated a joke disappeared, the smile lost range. Gabor kept showing up. She doubled down on accessories, on personality, as if to light up the stage around a face that no longer moved the way it used to. Her story is about the theatricality of staying young, and the toll that theatricality can take when it becomes literal. Tony Curtis, one of Hollywood's classic leading men, later described by critics as looking like a wax figure. Male faces age differently. Male skin is thicker, and seeking feminine surgical strategies can produce odd results. Curtis began cosmetic changes later than many of his peers, but once he started, the effects accumulated. Over the years, his once vibrant expression smoothed into a taut surface, and the irony is sharp. A man whose cinematic roles demanded emotional nuance found his face less able to show it. In his later life, Curtis turned to painting, pouring emotion onto canvas, while his face grew increasingly static. It's a quietly tragic image. An artist with the ability to transform meaning elsewhere, while the face that once did so on film had been muted. Linda Evans, a case of natural beauty turned unnecessarily into something else. She rose to fame when her looks and presence were fresh and perfectly suited to television in the 1960s, and then to the larger-than-life glamour of the 1980s on Dynasty. That very natural beauty might have aged into a striking maturity, but a series of interventions in the late 1980s and beyond led to a look that some critics called overfilled and stretched. What makes Evans's story especially poignant is a public life that later embraced spirituality and authenticity. In interviews, she spoke about the value of being whole, yet photographs suggested a face that had been reworked in pursuit of youth. The contradiction here isn't just cosmetic, it's cultural. When someone who talks about inner life and acceptance appears to have attempted surgical permanence, the cognitive dissonance stings. Priscilla Presley's story reads like a warning about shortcuts. For many years, she managed subtle refinements, a conservative approach to staying camera-ready. But in the early 2000s, she became the victim of a dangerous practice. Injections performed by an unlicensed practitioner that reportedly used industrial-grade silicone, a lubricant, not a medical-grade filler. The result, according to dermatologists who have seen similar damage, can be catastrophic. Migration of foreign material through tissues, lumps, hardening, and deformity that are often impossible to fully correct. Presley's case is less about vanity and more about vulnerability. High-profile people seeking privacy can be targeted by unscrupulous providers promising discreet fixes. The crime here is not just aesthetic. It's that someone exploited trust and exposure and left permanent harm. What stands out in Priscilla's aftermath isn't only the damage, but the courage behind her decision to continue public life despite it. Carol Baker, the unforgettable face from Baby Doll, offers another kind of tragedy, erasure of distinctiveness. Baker's earlier career was defined by an unusual mix of sensual innocence and specific features, full lips, wide-set eyes that set her apart. As the decades passed, her looks shifted toward what one critic called the generic plastic surgery face, a standardized, featureless gloss that stripped away the individual traits that once made her memorable. There's an irony here worth pausing on. Features that other women might spend fortunes to recreate were altered away. In effect, Baker's transformation serves as an example of how the industry's homogenizing ideals can make uniqueness itself a casualty. Anne Margaret, the performer whose energy powered entire scenes, shows us another, particularly painful disconnect. She was kinetic, alive, every movement, every tilt of a cheek was part of her performance. Over time, multiple lifts and the introduction of Botox erased a good portion of that mobile expressiveness. Directors learned to film her differently. More full-body shots, fewer close-ups. Imagine a dancer whose feet remain quick, but whose face can't fully show the emotion of the steps. That contrast, the body still incandescent, the face sterile, creates a strange, almost dissonant viewing experience. Anne Margaret kept performing with a courageous exuberance, even as the face that once punctuated her performances quietly betrayed the choices meant to preserve it. If there's a through line among these 9 stories, it's not simply that people changed their faces. It's that they were trying to solve a dread that all public figures face, the idea that aging equals obsolescence. Hollywood runs on a cruel double standard: worship youth while commodifying the past. That tension pushes some toward risky choices, sometimes with informed consent, sometimes without. Sometimes the surgeries themselves were primitive or experimental. Other times the problem was repetitive tinkering that compounded earlier damage. And sometimes, as in Priscilla Presley's case, the danger came from predatory, unlicensed practitioners offering discretion at a deadly price. There are deeper truths here about identity and agency. Some stars chased perfection and lost nuance. Some used surgery as a safety net for relevance. Others were preyed upon. A few, like Joan Rivers, turned it into an act of defiant control and remained both admired and ridiculed. Others, like Mary Pickford, remind us that history's innovators can become its casualties when technology outstrips wisdom. This subject deserves more than schadenfreude. These were real people, often working within systems that told them their value decreased with each passing year. The medical community has changed dramatically, and modern techniques are safer and subtler. But the cultural pressure, the whisper that your worth is tied to a measurement on a mirror, remains loud. So, what do we take from these stories? First, humility. We should be slow to judge an alteration without understanding the fear behind it. Second, curiosity in how we value people. If a society measures affection in youth rather than life lived, we will see more of these tragedies. And finally, empathy. Many of the men and women here chose the knife, not because vanity is shallow, but because they believed, rightly or wrongly, that the industry that fed them would turn away. There's also a practical takeaway for anyone who considers cosmetic changes. Information matters. Techniques evolve. Expertise matters. The ethics of those offering procedures matters. The difference between restoration and erasure is often the combination of skill and restraint and a clear-eyed view of what aging means in a life and a career. When you look back at the photos of these stars, the radiant early shots and the later ones that trouble us, remember that they are more than a cautionary tale about vanity. They are a mirror. They reflect how we, as a culture, respond to time and beauty, and they ask a quiet question: will we honor the faces that told our stories, or will we insist on a version of perfection that leaves nothing human behind? These 9 lives don't provide neat answers. They provide testimony to the power of image, the seduction of youth, the danger of technological hubris, and the small heroism of continuing on after a visible hurt. If you leave with one image from this piece, let it be this: the features we think of as flaws are also the atlas of a life. Every line is a sentence in a story. Erasing them might change how we look, but it doesn't erase what we were, and often in trying to look the same forever, we risk losing the very expression that made us unique.